de vous accueillir aujourd'hui au nom de l'ULOB et de CERBAL, le Centre canadien d'études de recherche en bilinguisme et aménagement linguistique. Welcome to the Oldie Research Forum. The aim of the forum, as many of you know, is to provide a platform for an exchange between the University of Ottawa and the researchers, pedagogues, and international and national guest researchers and so on, in the domains of second language teaching and language policy. The forum is open to all, but as you know, registration is preferred and required by email, and many of you have been in contact with dirilob@uottawa.ca for that registration. We do broadcast these through Adobe Connect, and if you are listening to me, but I can't see you, then you have already dialed in to the appropriate link. Nous avons une très belle programmation de conférences cette année qui aura lieu tout au long de l'année. Today marks the second talk of 4, which will occur this fall, and there are 2 more planned for the winter session. La prochaine conférence aura lieu mercredi le 18 novembre à 13h jusqu'à 14h30. Et c'est celle par Nathalie Auger de l'Université Paul Valéry à Montpellier 3. Elle sera ici. Et elle va parler de les langues familiales de la migration comme ressources pour la classe. So, just this is sort of a promotion of the next presentation. That presentation is sponsored by GRILT, le groupe de recherche interdisciplinaire en langue et technologie. A little logistic detail that I would like to mention at this time is that we have this room until 2:30. So we actually have to be out by 2:30, is that correct? Yes. So just be aware of the timing, and I'll be waving at you if it looks like you're going to go past, but we hopefully will have time after your presentation, Liying, to have questions. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Beverly Baker, our head of, I'm going to get it wrong, Beverly, Assessment and Evaluation Sector. Language assessment? What are you calling ourselves?
Language assessment.
Language assessment, who will present our speaker for today. And it's important to note that the presentation is being sponsored by the research group that Beverly presides over, and it is the Language Assessment Research Group, LARG. So, bienvenue et merci, Beverly.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, thank you all for coming out, and it's really my great pleasure to introduce Liying Cheng. I've known her for many years now, and she's been a friend and a colleague, and has always been very supportive of me as I've been launching my own career in this area. So I've always been very, very appreciative of the support that she's given me. So I feel very, very privileged to be able to introduce her to you all now. So she's professor and director of the Assessment and Evaluation Group at the Faculty of Education at Queen's University. Her primary interests are the impact of large-scale testing on instruction and relationships between assessment and instruction, as well as the academic and professional acculturation of international and immigrant students, workers, and professionals in Canada. In addition, she has conducted more than 170 conference presentations. She's published over 120 journal articles and written a number of books on English assessment as well as English language teacher development and other topics. The title of her talk today is Teachers Grading Decision Making, Validating the Interface Between Teaching and Assessment. So take it away, please.
Thank you, Beverly. I wanted to say thank you for all of you to come to the talk, and I wanted to thank Ottawa U and to thank the official Institute of Bilingual Education. Thank you, and for inviting me here. So it was great, and to see a classroom that is not really very conventional. So I feel I might have to kind of like hold the keyboard, and if the pointer doesn't really work. It's nice. You have all the things you can see on the slides. The things I wanted to say is I have very poor eyesight, so if I can't read my own slides, just forgive me. And I wanted to get a chance to know you a little bit. Like, how many of you are professors here? Are teachers here? How many of you consider yourself students? You graduate students? So?
We're in the teacher's education program.
Effective education? Good. So you're going to be teachers, or you are teachers who are doing?
We're going to be teachers. So we can make it through.
That's great, and great. I didn't get a chance to see you as well?
We're in the same program.
Oh, you're the same program. And I'm from Queens, you can see there. And so for our faculty, we actually have three convention programs. The teacher education program, we used to be 8 months, and now you're going to be 2 years. We're the only one that is 4 semester. So we do summer, fall, winter, and summer. And so the pre-service teacher education are changing. And I teach classroom assessment, and I teach a course called the TESOL course. It's not really TESOL, but it's teaching English as second language. It's basically help teachers to work with immigrant children in schools. So that's my major teaching tasks. We have a master in education program. We have a PhD in education program. And we have an online master's. We have an online diploma, and we have all the, what do you call the specialization, teacher specialization program? Additional qualifications program. So, and it's a whole range of program. And so mostly I'm saying is I work with teachers. And that's mostly what I do in my career. I want to mention this, it's not going to work. I mention this is our assessment and evaluation group. And we got a full range of teaching activities as well. And mostly, we have graduate students working with us, and we offer quality assessment and evaluation service internationally. And we have one of our AEG members here. Jai is our upper year PhD student. I hope this is not my phone.
It might be yours. Yeah.
I am so terribly sorry about this.
Better yours than one of ours,
My apologies. So this is the assessment and evaluation group, and I want to talk about my work is kind of like situated with in the broader education context. I am one of the few language people in the effective education, but we have a belief that assessment work is really across all the subject area. And language is core issues embedded in education. So irrespective of what we teach, we have to teach through the language. So the language is important embedded in this piece. I'm going to talk about grading issues today. I'm going to give you the background of this study. And I'm going to use the studies to elaborate the meaning of grades. It's basically we want to find out when a student gets 76, what's behind that 76, what is representing. So the first part I want to talk about is this validating piece. When we think about validating, we're mostly talking about the interpretation and the use of a particular test score or grades. And here I wanted to, for us to think about is, although grades is mostly within the classroom context, but grading issues is the assessment of learning piece that teachers do at the end, and sometimes is a collection of things put together, and which has consequences to our students. So we want to look at the validation piece is to think about the classroom as a context. And this is slightly different from the large-scale test, like in Ontario, we have the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. That's a minimum competency test. Students get a pass and fail. That's a grade. But we are talking about grading within the classroom setting. The second piece I want to talk about is the interface. And we always say teaching and learning. So what is teaching and learning to you? You're a teacher, right?
A student teacher, but
Student teacher.
Yeah, so teaching is taking what you know and transferring it to somebody else, and learning is acquiring it.
Good, so you get a teacher, you get a student, let's say, and what's in between this?
Methods and knowledge, yeah.
Assessment. We always say teaching and learning, we always say teaching and learning together, but they are actually two different things, right? So you got a teacher, you get a student, and the interaction between those two actually makes it work. And what it makes work is when you bring the assessment piece into it, because the assessment is what you align the goal with you have an instruction goal, you have a learning goal, and you align that to say what I teach, by the end of my teaching, the assessment I do will help me to know whether my students has learned or not. So the assessment piece is very important, and that's the interface that I want to talk about here. Is we cannot really talk about grading, take teaching and assessment away. Although lots of people working in the field of language assessment think about teaching and assessment are the same thing, are the same process. So I want to start to think about is, this is one version of the definition of assessment, is the assessment probably including those four aspects. It's including, let me just do this, make it easier to read through, is assessment is including assessment events, is like, do we do assessment now, or in 2 minutes later, or at the end of the semester, or at the end of the course? Is that events happens, like when we talk about you can't do too much assessment, you can't do too little assessment, is how you need to time this out so you can support your students. The assessment tools, here we really talk about the instrument we use to measure students' learning. That could be a presentation, could be an essay, could be any sorts of, could be anything that you use to collect the learning data. And then you get the process. I'm going to read this is to say, assessment process can support students in the way that students see teachers and allies to their education. The feedback can help students to focus and help students to understand the requirement better. And this is how we do the process. I started to learn English when I was 16 in Chinese high schools. And I remember when I write an essay, and I give it to the teacher, and I come back with all right lines. Everything is wrong and needs to be revised. And the teacher has a way of deducting points. So towards the end, I actually have less than I started with. So I get negative points because I made so many mistakes. And that's a process sometimes not sending the most positive feedback to the students, that's when we call its assessment process. It's how this is done. I understand all the teachers' intention is to help the students to do better. But how we do it can have a tremendous impact on the students. Today, I want to talk about the decision piece. The decision piece is the one that we actually signed a mark to the students. This piece, when we talk about grades, is one grade accurately reflect what they truly are learned. We understand is if we do well on the assessment events, the tools we use the tools that's supposed for students to show their learning. We did well on the process, but the decision piece is really the one that you send the information back to the students. Is how well they do in terms of their piece of work, and sometimes who they are as a learner. I'm just kind of giving a little bit background to say that grading is challenging, is one of the most challenging aspects. It's challenging it's also a public statement as well. Like when I'm teaching here, and this is different, everybody can see me making the presentation, but mostly when Jeremy, when you teach, you have a classroom and it's not anybody can see you. But when you give a grade, that 76 is not just, it's not just 76. You interact with the parents for you guys as students, teachers. And sometimes the principals will ask about it. And mostly the students will think about it. And that's a professional judgment and quite difficult to do it well. I start to say is grading is not a new topic. It has been going on for a long time. And if you look at this piece of work, this is 1913. So it has been going on with us for a long time. There is a number of terms has been used to talk about grading. I prefer to use grading rather than marking. I think marking and grading to me are more or less the same thing, but grading seems to be more complex, not just giving the grades. There's all the evaluation piece you built into it about that piece of work. So I'm saying is this is kind of like a traditional study people has been looking at, and it's continue to our days in education because it remains that grades that each of the students gets by the end of the semester, sending a very important message about themselves. There's many aspects of the grading process, and I just want to mention some of the factors that's really contributing. Someone is at the door. I'm going to mention three aspects. This is research after research in the school sectors has demonstrated that there's a number of things that decide how the grading works. The grades they teach, so elementary teachers, secondary school teachers, and the university level teachers, they actually assigning grades in a very different way. Are you a PJ candidate?
I asked intermediate.
You as well?
Junior intermediate.
Oh, good. So you have a different aspects. So IS students and PJ students might have a different way of looking at it. And there's also the assessment training, is how much that teachers are trained and they are going to approach a grading very differently. And the subject matters teach. My math teachers always say, we give grades very differently with language people. And so those are the number of areas that have been highlighting. The second area that behind the study that we're going to do is to looking at the meaning of grades. So there's a whole bunch of researchers that have been looking at this, mostly looking at the achievement factors and non-achievement factors put into this. I have a group of doctoral level students who are in my class, and one of the person is tremendously interested in the role of homework plays. Homework in Ontario is not counted towards marks. Teachers, are you allowed to check homework? Are you going to give grades on homeworks? No. So the grading is, there is a context for grading. So I'm asking about Ontario because I'm more familiar with the Ontario policies. There's a whole bunch of policies related with grading in Ontario. When we think about it is if you put achievement, let's say my English achievement, into the grades, and then you put my effort into it. I could be a student who is really, really bright, who I actually don't do any of the work, and I have a good grade. But I could be one of the students trying really, really, really hard, but I still get a minimum grade. And do you as a teacher including those effort things into it? And if we include all of those things in, when you look at 76, you're going to ask is that 76 my achievement in English, or is it my English achievement plus my effort, plus the homework I do, plus my participation in the class? This makes it really, really difficult to understand, and that's the traditional validity issues. Validity has been going, kind of evolving for a long time. I'm using maybe 3 aspects to summarize the validity issues. So the validity started when we talk about, basically the test is measuring what we intended to measure. This is the traditional way of looking at it, and we talk about different aspects of validity. When we get to the Messick piece of work, this is 1989, and Messick is the first one to talk about validity together. And he talked about having a different aspects of the validity. I'm using this frame as a framework to guide this study, so I'm going to explain this a little bit. So basically this is still the framework that influences current validity framework. Is validity is about the interpretation of that grades or that scores and the use and decisions about that grades. So that's what we need to keep in mind. So on this side, we're basically talking about the interpretation. On this side, we talk about uses. There's other way of looking at it. So in terms of the grading issues, we could think about this in the progressive way. This is not my work. This is Messick's work to talk about a progressive model. So how is progressive goes is you just add up each of the piece. Remember we have a four piece. So what you have is if you go, sorry, wrong way. And if you go with the construct validity, which is actually the psychological, the latent variables we test or we give the grade to, or the content. That's probably the easiest one is what does the grades mean? 76. And then when we talk about the utility or relevance, we say, okay, what does the grades mean when it is assigned to a student? That's the utility part. Then the next one, Messick challenge is there is a value interpretations in a grade or test score. what does the grade mean when it is assigned to a student, or further, what's the value of this grade? This work is initially brought in and integrated by Sue Brookhart. It goes like this way, and then you look at the social consequences piece. What does the grade mean when it is assigned to a student, and what value is it? And even further, what will happen because of it? So if we want to do a research in this way, is we need to look at from the simple ones and going to the later one. I'm going to get a chance to revisit this a little bit, but I just wanted to throw some idea here is we wrestle with is what a grade mean. So if you look at the Asian grading scales, so is it A? Do we have A, B, C, D? So it's got A and you got nothing. That's the social ones, and also the context different. The next one is, this is kind of like you will see universities or schools and trying to adjust this. To say, okay, is it A should be 95 to 100 or should be 93 to 100? So you're trying to change the scales a little bit because the scales are scale. Remember when Messick talked about it, you're going to use the scale. And you're all in the Ottawa U teacher education program. Do you know how you get in? You applied, and so someone look at your marks, and someone look at some other things. Like you have a personal statement?
Yeah, it's like a long form application. We had to answer a couple questions about why we wanted to be a teacher and what we can bring to a classroom, things like that.
Good. And so how many of you are in one cohort?
I don't know, we're a small one. There's like 75 of us.
75 of us.
There's like 100 in global. Yeah, I don't know the other ones.
Do you know how many people apply?
I don't know how many applied. I know there's 330-ish.
Okay, so someone has to make a decision to say you're in and other people are not in. So there is a place there, and when you when you make decisions like this, remember that's the decision piece, is you have to adjust your skills a little bit. So you get the right people into your program, but nobody has all the place in the world to let everybody in. This is part of the reality things. This is part of the reality of the using of the grades as well. And this is another way of looking at it, is to wrestle to say, okay, is 79 a C or something? How do we get there? So a lot of the teachers make decisions to say, okay, in order to get 76, you have to do a project, you have to do a presentation, an essay, something. Should you put all this summative assessment into a final grade? You remember this is when you do things formatively, you analyze in the small ways, and you give support and you give feedback. Once that changed into a grades, I don't know, 76 A or B or C here in Ottawa U? It's a B plus. It's really, really good. I always remember 70 is a C. No? Well, you were in Ontario, so what's level 3?
Well, I actually just moved. Like, I was from Nova Scotia, so the system, like, with my undergrad was
Different.
Yeah.
Level 3?
The 3 was 70s. Yeah.
70s, and provincial, reach provincial standards. Okay, so that's 3. Okay, so that's what grades. And I'm going back to the language piece because this is a study I did with a group of language teachers, is to say there's lots of research in education, general education, K-12, but not a lot in the language field. So that's a gap. We wanted to look at it, and also based on the Asian grading things, we know that different contexts might look at the gradings very differently. And this is not small matter, is they say why we need to bother to understand Chinese teachers' grading issues. Well, the thing is, you have a Chinese students actually in Ottawa University. They apply, you look at their marks. This is not just about China, it's about the university is having students from so many different places, not just Ontario, even within Ontario's. And Canada is, we have, each of the province has education system of its own. We have, each of the province has a different grading system. So we need to understand this across different contexts. Not to say that 76 has to mean the same thing, but we have to know what 76 means behind that particular grades. And it is the awareness that makes it important. A number of us, we did a study and looking at, I'm going to show you 5 research questions, but I'm going to focus probably to look at 3 or 2 of the research questions. The questions based on the literature review we want to ask is, what are the factors that are contributing to the grades? What are the methods that teachers use to get to the grades? Remember, when we talk about methods, we actually talk about assessment tools. We want to see there's a relationship between the assessment tools they use and the factors actually influencing those. We talk about the relationship. We also, based on the research we built into, if we get a group of teachers to work with us, we want to see the elementary teachers and the secondary school teachers do give the grades in a slightly different way. Is assessment training plays an important part? Does class size make sense? This piece I like to focus more attention on is, this is the one is what measuring is associated with students' grades assigned. This piece is when we give stories to the teachers. We provide a scenario. We say, okay, if you have students in this way, what grades you would give? And if you give this grade, why? What's in your head? Because we really wanted to look at the validity of the grades, and we want to get into their heads to see why you do this. So these are the 2 pieces. I'd like to get a chance to talk with you. This is a survey that a group of us did in Chinese secondary school. Chinese secondary school is 6 years. So they do 6 years elementary, and they do 3 years in junior high, and then they do the last 3 years in high school. So that's 6 elementary, 6 secondary, and then they get to the university levels. So as you can see, not all the teachers that we, in part of our study, are actually having a university degree. So there's still part of the teacher education part is still a 3-year college for those teachers. It's most of our teachers' population are relatively young population. And so you can see that we have like a split between the junior high school and senior high school, which is the first 3 years of secondary school and the last 3 years. The class size, you can see it's bigger than here. So that's the typical part of a Chinese English language teachers. This group is English language teachers, means they teach English language as a school subject. And the major school subject is Chinese, English, mathematics, plus all the science and social sciences subjects. We used a questionnaire which has 4 sections. So the first section on the factors influencing teachers' decision. The second one is on assessment methods. And then it's the 3 scenarios. I'd like to pay more attention on the scenarios. In order to answer the lots of questions, I'm going to just talk to this briefly. Mostly I'm going to present the descriptive statistic, which basically is looking at where they are, what are the factors they pay most attention, what are the methods, assessment tools they use. And in order to find the relationships, we have to do a fact analysis. I'm not going to go into the technical part. And we did some regressions. Then we look at the role of the grades level the teacher teach, the assessment training they have, and the class size. We look at the interactions about these 3 factors in relation to what teachers do in the classroom. And we separate with junior high school teachers and senior high school teachers. I'm going to talk about this later on. This is the qualitative piece related with the scenarios. I'm going to go back to this later on. We use Messick's progressive model to analyze it. I'm going to talk about the analysis when we come to the scenario. So these are the frequencies of the questionnaire. These are some of the factors we put into the questionnaire. I'm just going to point out a little bit. If you look at the first 2 factors, actually, I can't see it. The first 2 factors that this group of teachers think that they do more, the first one is students' effort. This is on a 1 to 5 Likert scale on the questionnaire. So that's very high. The second one is they said they put non-test factors for borderline cases. We know in terms of assessment is when a student is at the borderline, that's always lots of effort. And the same related with the teacher education program as well, because we really want to make sure we make a good decision around that time. These are items. These are means.
No, not the numbers, but the factors themselves. Did they emerge from the teachers' or responses, or you had these factors and you told them from 1 to 5 which one?
We did the latter one. So this was not come from them, and these are coming from the literature.
So they might have had other factors in mind if they're not covered.
Yes. Yes, this is the nature of the survey. A lot of people will say you should never really do a survey. You should always do a qualitative piece. And this is another chance is we based our questionnaire based on the previous literature review on grading issues and in China. So we build this questionnaire, we'll ask a question. So they read it, and that's what they listed is what they do more and what they do less. So the last one that they consider is the grades distributions of other teachers. That's the one they care the least in the survey. These are the second sessions related with the tools that the teachers use to give grades. This is a shorter list, so it's a little bit clear to see. The first one, and you can see the teachers was counting on to give grades is using exams. Remember, there's a particular research context for this. It's in China, and the one that they used list is the essay type of question. I wanted to stop here and just ask you guys a little bit questions. So if I ask you this question, if you're going to be the person that doing this questionnaire, which would you say you use most
Both.
for giving grades?
It's in this included my undergrad in literature, so
Mm.
we're graded by essay.
That's the most.
Yeah.
Good. What about you?
Yeah, I was history, anthropology, and English. There was a lot of exams, but most of my grading was done with essays.
Anyone is from science? Science teacher? Yeah. And so what's in your area?
Well, it's a mix of pretty much everything in between, but mostly,
What kind of exams? Like what does your exam looks like?
problem solving questions.
Ah, huh. Are there a lot of writing related with it?
Not so much like essay writing, not so much questions. Like there's a few explanation questions, but most of it would be calculations.
So this is just, I wanted to give you a context, like these are the kind of assessment tools the teachers use to give grades, or the kind of like influencing factors that contributing to the teachers' grades. We did a factor analysis later on. So the nature of the factor analysis is one way is to get your data smaller and also more kind of like accurate to respond related with the questionnaire. So we actually put it into 3 factors. I don't really want to go into too much about this kind of like a factor analysis, but I wanted to say to you is in order to answer the second 2 research questions is we find direct relationship between the factors and the assessment methods that teachers use. There's a direct relationship between these 2. And so that's the factor part. And this is what we actually look at is to say, okay, if we look at the factors, we can roughly to say there's 3 big factors related with this. It's the factors related with policy, learning objectives. It's the factor related with the effort, and there is the performance based. It's the performance-based factors that are there to influence teachers' decision making. And for the kind of like the tools that teachers use paper and pencil, and teachers use their own assessment methods. And there is a whole chunk of the assessment tools are related with performance-based. So that's the kind of a context we have in the Chinese high school. I'm going to skip the part and talking about multiple regression when we look at the relationships. And what I like to mention is when we look at the interaction between this influencing factor and assessment tools that teachers use, we realized all these 3 P's have relations, all these 3 P's that contributing to the grades that teachers make. The most important piece is the interaction between grades level and assessment training. We know that as the students progressing through the schools, particularly in the Chinese context, they have more assessment or more large-scale exam as they go. So the method they use and the factors influencing the teacher's decision is become more intense centered around the public exam. That we did discover in this study. What we didn't discover in the study is we saw class size is a big factor. Maybe because the Chinese teachers working in this big class, then it will influencing the methods they use. That's something we didn't find out. And maybe because they already use mostly objective assessment terms. So I wanted to spend the next little while to work with you on these 3 cases. And so let's just read this, and then we see what grades we're going to give to the students if that student is in our own classroom. I give you the time to read this case. Punan.
If it is, first of all, purpose again, whether it's summative or formative. So for me, I might go for A if it is just summative without being concerned about this to get honest on it.
This is all within the classroom context.
Okay, so probably it might be B, but along with the feedback. So I won't just lower the mark and just leave it there, but talk to her about it.
Punan is a typical researcher. She's changing the scenario and putting more context with it. Beverly, what would you think?
I would definitely do B if I told the class ahead of time I was going to be grading partially for their effort. And if I didn't tell them ahead of time that was part of the grade, then
Sorry.
then I would.
So what is the concept of validity of cut?
Yes, Jennifer.
I would do D.
Okay. So none of the above.
I would grade her on quality of the work. The criteria set out.
Okay.
I can't compare it to the rest of the class.
Okay, so that's one absolute thing. Why you can't compare with the rest of the class?
But because we don't do that.
Oh, okay. So we don't do that means, is there a policy on grading here in Ottawa U?
No, I'm just saying, even with the teacher education program, there's been a strong movement over the last 15, 20 years in Ontario education to have evaluation grids so that the students, assessment is the students, when they receive the task and the assignment, they have the evaluation grids from the set. They can then be the masters of their own.
Okay, so this is a part of the assessment training.
Yes.
And in relation to, we also have the policies. We have a curriculum document. And you guys probably read the Growing Success. So one of the key things with growing success, this is the Ontario document, is growing success is to do the alignments. So the students setting the goals, or they set the goals together with you, and they know how to get there. They know this is good work, what good work looks like, and this is, I know how to get there, right? This is hypothetical, and this work is based on Sue Brookhart grading project that she did many years ago. So we changed the scenario to build into a hypothetical case, just to get the teachers to talk about what it is. remember this go back to Messick's framework, which is the theoretical framework we use. For this, if you look at this table, it's going to be the next three table, we have three choices, A, B, C. So A is focusing on the quality, just the quality of the work. And the B choice is basically lower the grades. The C is raise the grades. So we just calculate the students, we just calculate the teacher's response. So you will see how many responses are there. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a Messick's progressive model goes down that way. So 1 is just construct validity. Second is construct validity plus utility or relevance. And then the next one is construct relevance plus value implication. And then the fourth one is put social consequences. So we analyzed teacher's result. This time we did give teacher a blank and to say, okay, you choose A, B, or C, A, B, or C. But then you tell us why you choose A or B. So they write a response for us, and we analyze it based on their response and put them into 1, 2, 3, 4, based on the framework. So what you have is, I highlighted a little bit, and this is the piece to say most of the Chinese teachers said they're going to lower the mark. That 40% of the teachers. There's 123 of them, and they said we're going to lower marks. That's a strategy.
So in that context, in China, what's the chance that the student understands why the mark is lower? Does she just get the lower mark and she has to guess that the teacher did it?
I think you're great to point out this is we don't know. We don't know. I mean, in Ontario, we keep saying is we need to negotiate. So when the student gets 76, they know exactly what it means. And they can interpret it. We hopefully, they interpret it. And then they know what has been going on with their learning and where they need more or less. No, never less, more. Oh, which area they need to do more. So if you look at this is just kind of like, we want to really to get into teachers' head to say, okay, how you make decisions. Let's look at another case. This is about missing work. You remember one of the issues we talk about is grades, a combination of non-achievement and achievement factor. So those are the scenario is to wrestle with it. I particularly want to ask the teacher education people. What do you think?
Well, this says the student's grade are based on the quizz's testing.
Okay.
I would assume that they would be missing a certain portion of the grade.
Okay, so that's what you think.
But don't you have different grades for different assignments or different quizzes?
Yeah.
Why should one affect the other?
Okay.
You have missed one assignment, you didn't get the mark for that, but you did well on your quizzes, so the total at the end is going to be 100%, I assume. So you miss that part, you don't get the mark, and you get the mark for quizzes and the other ones.
Okay, so you.
Affect the other.
So you were saying is whatever they're missing that piece. If that piece is 20%, that's what they're missing,
Course, yeah.
right? Is there any other interpretations?
Depends on the institution's policy. It may mean, A may be what the student should receive for
You do not routinely expect to get zero.
But the homework is not going to result into a zero.
But it depends on policy.
The final one.
What's
Of the homework.
what's the Ontario document say?
For a complete assignment, you have to give a number and then we're going to consider them as the essential part of the final.
Okay. So what should we give to the students in this situation?
What she has earned.
Okay. All right. Is that A or B? A, B, or C? I can't remember.
Okay.
A, right? So got 0. So this is what the Chinese teachers given. So the first one would say, okay, you're missing, you get F, right? You get a fail. And the second one to say, okay, we give you D. The third one is kind of like increase it, we give you a C. And so actually the majority of the teachers actually agree with you. In this case.
Final mark you're talking about, the final course mark, or?
When we talk about grading, we usually talk, we don't talk about grading in midterm. We mostly talk about
Final
grading.
mark for the course, whether
Yes.
you pass the course or not.
Yes.
And there is this range from F to C, depending on whether they have missed.
Well, this is only a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical scenario.
Is whether they have that authority to, to make these wide range decisions about students' work based on missing assignments.
And if we go with Beverly's, is we tell them ahead of time.
What
So-
they say, that if you miss the assignments, I'm going to give you C instead of A? How do we justify that, educationally speaking?
I don't know how to answer that question.
I've never seen that.
Yeah. And
I don't think we do that.
No.
Then you give enough value to those assignments so that if they don't do it, they don't pass it. But you couldn't say if the assignment is more than 10%, but if you don't do it, I'm gonna pay you. That's not fair.
Well, there's both actually, like what Jennifer said. You could give enough values that if they don't do it.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
But that,
one
then
way.
you justify
Another
it.
way is saying, these are the pieces you need to have, and if you don't have any of them, you fail.
Yeah, but that's why we have criteria. We say that's the value of that assignment.
yeah, I think when we wrestle about this, is there's issues to say we need to let the students know how we make decisions, and then we have to kind of like align with whatever we're going to teach in the classroom. But there's other issues related with learning. So the third piece is really on the improvement of learning. So this teacher said that there's two component, right? Two component together is when you have two components, and we understand sometimes you can't just add the 5 sets of assignments and just give average. So what would you do? Did you give overall C? Did you give it to B? Because there's the improvement.
How much value have you assigned for each test?
Well, we don't really know, but what we know is these are the 2 tests we add up together to give a mark. Yeah. So what would you do?
it depends.
Good answer. Depends on what?
On the process, because sometimes it's only the final grade that's considered and it goes. Yeah, for the record, that sometimes it's,
No, this one said it's two put together, right?
so then
Yeah, but what did she say in the course outline? Did she say S1 is 50% of your mark, or is it 50%?
Okay.
What did she say in the outline?
What's the Ontario guideline say? You don't know? So what does it say?
I think A, average.
Okay. So for the teacher candidates here, and so you need to get familiarized with Ontario curriculum. What they said is the most recent and the most consistent. So most recent and most consistent, that's the mark you're going to give. And so if you look at a student who is having an improvement, then you're probably likely to reward that. But it has to be the most consistent, not just one odd performance, right? So that's the policy. So grading issues is part of it is what you guys decide, we don't do this here. But we don't do this here, there's a whole bunch of beliefs and values you actually put into it. And part of it's training. And part of it is because it's the Ontario, let's say if you teach in Ontario, the Ministry of Education already gave you a guideline to say, okay, here are the things that teachers should really follow.
So this means that given assessment, and I don't know very much about that, but this means that if you see improvement, then the performance that's given overall might not represent quality of language so much as quality of improvement. Like improvement because it's part of the concept, or effort because it's part of the concept.
Well, no, improvement and effort are not the same thing.
No, but well, it seems like yeah, improvement and effort. So effort here and improvement in Ontario.
I think his idea is like this. So every student coming into our program at different level. Let's say these are two of my students. And so let's say over 12 weeks, over a semester. So we've got like this. I've got a student. So which one has made the biggest improvements is this student who come in a bit late and huge, but they're still at the same level towards the end. Then as a teacher, you need to ask yourself is, am I seeing learning in the growth model? And if this is consistently, will my grades showing this, or will my grades is like most of the university grading is we put on a curve, normal curve, or whatever it is. I don't really know the policy here. I've taught in universities who the department had said, Liying, this you have to follow this. According to our program, you can only have 2 students in the top level because of this norm curve. Here at Queen's and all my students can get to.
Criterion reference testing, you don't do that. It's non-reference is different, but criterion reference, if you have all achieved A+, you deserve to get A+. We don't say, oh, I'm only going to get 2 marks A+, and the rest of you don't deserve it.
Yeah. So it depending on the kind of a belief we have. And for the growth-based learning is becoming giving a lot of attention. And also, if we think about every student is unique, and then will the grades to indicate that, then you get a little bit trouble when you look at whether you want to have reference of the student. And for example, many of our ESL students in schools may get higher mark because the tremendous growth they have over a short period of time. But once they get into your classroom, these students and these students are in the same classroom. This I'm saying is they are at the same level, and they may not be same level no matter how hard the students do, right? Then you get into a different set of issues. So the grades are really complicated depending on the use you're going to use it. If you just use it in your classroom, all my students can get to 90 or 100 in reality if they meet the criteria. But if my grades are used for students to get into graduate school or teacher education, that's a different set of use I put into it. Then 76 and 76 are not exactly the same thing. So that's why I think it's not like to say that everywhere teachers should use the same criterion. We should use the criterion and let the students know in our classroom. But then when teacher's mark is used by stakeholders beyond the classroom, we need to know, we can't really go to Jeremy classes that how do you do it? Because your students is all over the world. But roughly, in the sense is we have to know exactly what you put into it. It's for your teacher candidates is, it's not like there is a guideline to say exactly how you give grades, but you need to be aware what's the factors you put into it. You communicate with your students, you communicate sometimes with the parents, and you communicate with other people. And most important is we probably have a job to educate the rest of the education community. So I want to go back to this model to say that if we use Messick's way of looking at it, we do need to understand the validity piece of the grades. I'm just going to summarize it here so you can get a chance to ask questions. When we look at the factors through the qualitative scenarios, we know there's a number of things teachers put in. These are the Chinese English language teachers' words. Is when they look at the category 1, this is the construct piece. They said, okay, we're going to use the grades to reward students for the work done. And it is a reflection of academic enabler. This is also not my words. This is the previous researchers' words. Enabler is, I'm using the grades to do maybe motivation or something to support students to do work, to do good work. There is a reference meaning in terms of the progress in studies. It is a score, and it is a student's achievement. So that are the things the teachers say are in their grades from the construct point of view. From the utility point of view is how it's used. It's used to encourage students, it's used to reminder, and it's used as a warning. So you can see how many uses teachers put the grades in. And if we go further, and there is this value that teachers build in. They say, oh, it has to be fair, and it has to be beneficial for my students. So I need to be increasing my, I need to encourage my student. And I also need to be strict with my students. It's like, I'm not giving you 89 until I see a work representing that. So there's lots of things going on. There's the grace model, the progress thing. We also has data from the teachers to say, okay, there is a consequences on students' schooling, like especially in the Chinese education part, there is the grades promotion. So sometimes if you fail too many courses, you can't really go up to one level. Not in Ontario. None of your teachers can do that. You can't really say, I'm going to hold you on grade 8. You have to let the students go on to grade 9. And, but there's the policy here with it. And if you go back to the early image I gave it to you is, there's also the social piece. If the students get really excited, said, I got 92. Other stakeholders, for example, the parents, to say, that's not good enough. Because maybe the neighbor's kids get 96, something like that. So there is the consequences related with there's related with the students' grades. And I really think it's very, very important for us to know that. I'm going to, I'm going to bring it here as a way of closing this to say, based on the research that we talked about, and I didn't get a chance to talk about the question 2 and question 3 in detail, but within the Chinese context, I think it makes sense is really for us to know what are the training they have, what are the belief, and in relation to the grades we do. We did not really look at more than the English class, so we don't really know what's happening in the other classroom. So based on this, I'm just going to mention to you is this project is published, one in the Language Assessment Quarterly, the other is in Education, Assessment in Education. This is the quantitative piece, and this is the qualitative piece. So you get a chance to see more details of this piece of study. Based on what we have learned, and I applied to Shirk Insight Grant, these are the questions we ask. We refine the questions, and I feel that in order to understand the validity issues around the grades, it is important for us to understand the context that grades are used. So my colleague and I, Chris DeLuca, we applied for Shirk grants. We look at the context in Canada. We look at the context in China. What we wanted to map out is to say, apart from the internationalization of the university campus, is we think is behind how the grades is given is the value about teaching and learning. Like, you have a very different ways of looking at grades than the teachers there in China when we did this study about 4 years ago. So I think it's this piece is we have to look at the two learning cultures, is what teachers believe, what students believe as well. So we wanted to see the grading policy. We want to see what are policies that has been teaching teachers, guiding the teachers. How do teachers construct grades? This is the construct piece. How do teachers, students, parents, and principals understand this? So we're going to bring in different stakeholders. And this is a study based on the number of studies done in the education sector to say, when we have 76, all different stakeholders understanding things very differently. And it's not like they should understand the same, but at least they should really know how 76 is arrived. So these are the few things, and we wanted to look at, so we want to do a 5-year study actually. We're using four years as empirical data collection. And then we're going to use the conceptual framework, the validity framework, to answer that question. Before I stop and you ask questions, I throw this.
So there's actually a grading policy in China?
Probably we don't really know at what level. But I think it will be, there could be like a country-wide policy?
Explicitly stated policy? Or?
We don't really know. That's our empirical question we want to find out. We know there is no such thing in Canada. We have to go with each of the province. And the Ontario province has very specific grading guidelines. They said you should not really put non-achievement factors. And you might remember I remember when my son was growing up, there's always, in terms of the report card, the achievement part, the non-achievement part. That's called effort. So this, you give achievement this you say satisfactory in terms of non-achievement factors. That way you get it, you probably think that it's more just the achievement. But we've talked to teachers in Ontario. Nothing is pure. So I'm going to stop here, and so for you to ask the questions.
I'll let you guys ask the questions, but on behalf of Obi and Lard and Creole, Sabad,
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
I have about 5 minutes because they'll have.
Oh, they want to go. I'm so sorry. I talked too much.
Not at all. And we can always continue as we walk back outside, but just